See it live. Let me just get that link. Oh, okay, great. I might just share this on LinkedIn right now. Or actually, I'll do it when Arie starts. Yeah, and Niall is here. Niall is here.
I am.
Hey, Niall. That's weird. That's really weird. Okay.
Alrighty.
I knew you were going to wear a white shirt. That's why I wore black t-shirt.
I needed something more slimming perhaps next time. I think, hello, Arie. How you doing? I think white's the best color for us to have, I think, to be honest. I think you're the odd one out, Sam.
That's okay. I like being the odd one out. Ironically, my presentation is black. So there you go. Black t-shirt, dark presentation. It's all about the whole look and feel, the style. By the way, I think people have joined already.
Excellent. Welcome, everybody. We will be getting going in approximately 5 minutes as a grace period, so bear with us. All the panelists are here. My name is Niall McShane. I will be, I suppose, guiding us through this wonderful time we have together with these great speakers we've got lined up for you today. I'm coming from Melbourne in Victoria. And I think we have a bit of a geographically dispersed group here. Someone from Brazil. I'm not sure where Arie is today.
I'm in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Right, there you go. Lucky I didn't try and guess. So for those of you that are coming in or on the call, we're going to be running a Q&A. The chat will be there, but the panel and the hosts here won't be checking the chat. That's for participants to talk amongst themselves. We'll be using the Q&A to filter questions through to the presenters and to myself, who'll be facilitating us through this journey today. So you should be able to navigate your way down and see the Q&A in the chat separately at the bottom of your screen. So fire any questions, line them up if you like in the Q&A section. I'm sure the panelists, the presenters will field any or all questions, either related or not to the content today, I'm sure. So fire away in there, and the chat's there for participants to talk amongst themselves. We'll give it another few minutes, maybe another couple of minutes. And then we're leading off with Sam, I'm told, as our keynote. Is that right, Mr. Zawadi? Yep. Anyway, he's on mute. I'll go and have another cup of tea.
I think we're leading off with Arie first.
Okay, we're going to lead off with Arie. No worries, mate. Important to check the run order. So you're ready to go, Arie. You don't need to share your screen. You've got your pen and paper. You're going analog today. Is that right, mate?
Yeah, I am completely.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, we'll go 60 more seconds of grace period, because I know, Arie, you did want to start on time and respect the people that got here for the start of the show. So we'll give it another 60 seconds, and then I will formally introduce you and kick this show off. So welcome, everybody. This is the second of a series of talks that are going around the world, where we're going to be presenting some of the themes and topics around agnostic agile that we think are emerging globally from some of the people that are doing the work at the coalface. My job here is to simply set the context and introduce the speakers. My name's Niall McShane. I've worked with everybody who'll be on the call and presenting to you today, so I have first-hand knowledge of them. And the one thing I can guarantee you is these people have all been at the coalface and done the real stuff, okay? We're not talking theory here. We're talking people that do things and achieve outcomes. So my short contribution, just to open us up here and set the scene, is around agnostic agile and its intent, and you know, what has brought us all here today. And I think if we contrast what's just happened this week with the release of the new Scrum Guide, the fact that they're releasing versions of this thing as a framework when the practitioners were already using the best bits and working in a way that made sense to them. They were applying it from a values and principles based on the job. So the word commitment has just come into the Scrum Guide, right? An agnostic agilist, I would imagine, would be talking about commitment every day, regardless of whether they're doing Scrum or not. I think for me, it's a perfect example of where we don't have to wait for a framework or for someone to write something down, for us to use what's pragmatic and reasonable and stay agnostic, work from the principles of practicality in the workplace. And that's what we're going to hear about today. People are out there doing the real work. We're going to be starting off with Arie, who I think he's without peer in terms of the energy and experience. He has been there since that manifesto was written so many years ago and is still going hard at the edge of where this industry's at. Following that, we're going to talk with Sam Zawadi, who is going to present his keynote on agnostic agile, where it is today relative to the overall business agility landscape. And then we'll finish up, I think, with Peter Lam, who, it'd be fair to say, is working in some of the most complex environments in the country I live in at the moment, managing change on a scale that we can only imagine. So he's going to talk about how he draws from some of this agnostic agile mindset, if you like, and also provide some commentary on what that means in terms of certifications, et cetera, and all those sorts of things in globally, I think, Peter, if that's okay. Hopefully I haven't spoken out of turn. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Arie. We won't make a big fanfare of it, mate. I'll simply hand over to you and you can kick us off unless any of the panelists have anything to say before we start. Otherwise, I'll just throw straight to Arie. Excellent. The Q&A is running. Please put your questions through to there. We're going to have questions at the end, okay, which I will facilitate. So as you hear Arie, if things come up, put them in the Q&A. I will then curate them and play them back in the Q&A afterwards. All good? Thumbs up. Arie, ready to go?
I'm ready, Niall. Thank you very much. I have to talk a little bit about that one word that you just used, energy. It's 6 a.m. here, so I need to get my energy together right now to get going. Good morning, everybody from Johannesburg, South Africa. It's good to be here. It's like Niall said, this is the second. Yesterday we did the China Southeast Asia session, and it's so good that we are here with a nice group of people to talk about agnostic agile and what we agreed on when we're talking about first things in the summer to set this up. Let's do it around the globe and do that, every couple of months, and let's select a theme. So the theme is business agility, and I have a talk for you that I call Agile Now What, and I wanna explain it a little bit, because that business agility thing for me is a no-brainer. I mean, if you don't help the business with what you do in the Agile way, it has no use at all, right? That's why we do it. But at the same time, I can understand where it's coming from because of that one word, software, right? In the values and in the principles. So it's Agile Now What, and I chose this topic and the title because what we know is at the moment that so many people try to get their organizations agile, but they struggle a lot. And I want to talk you through how I perceive business agility and how to get there, and also what are success factors and maybe fail factors on the other side of the spectrum. Feel free, as Niall said, to ask questions. Please do so. I love that at the end, because in the questions very often there's the hands-on answer, how you do things. And what I want to share with you is how I did it. I'm not the kind of guy that tells you philosophical stuff. I'm a pragmatic. Also, if you read my bios, I'm a pragmatic, blah, 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 blah. So that's what it is. But feel free to ask the details or to reflect on your own situation when I say something on how I did it or how I do it, right? So let's go. And I want to start with what for me business agility really is. And to explain that to you, I want to take you back to 1993. November 1993, I started working at a Dutch governmental organization with a group of 30 people. I was a member of the technical design team. And it was, in my perception, it was May 1994. And the project was stopped. And it's literally like this, it's 8:15 in the morning, you walk into your room, I think it was the 9th floor or something. After an hour and 15 minutes in the car, you. And then someone walks in, hey, can you come to a room, because we have as a project team, we have a meeting together. So I walk into that room, we're all there, and 10:15 everybody was out. I was an external at that moment in time. I think all of us were at the time, and we were out. Project stopped. And I was standing next to my car, and I thought, what the fuck is this? You work with 30 people full time for 7 months, and then somebody walks into the room and says, okay, guys, go home, it's all done. And I thought, I feel extremely uncomfortable with this, right? This is the kind of waste that I don't like at all, and I despise the kind of waste of public money. I mean, if you spend public money, as a country, you should serve the public with it, right? You should get better in elderly care or whatever you do, but wasting it like this is, for me, idiocy. And I took a decision. I had an hour drive to the office, and I was before lunchtime. I was at the office, and I said we had 6 managers. I spoke to 5 of them before the lunch. I'm never going to do this again. I'm not going to work like this. And I thought, I strongly believe in the motto, you're the architect of your own life. And I thought, if they're going to fire me, they fire me. I'll find a solution. But this is not what I want. And they didn't fire me, by the way. And I think it was maybe 2 weeks later that I got into the world of rapid application development. We're doing a pilot with the Royal Navy, and they said, okay, you want to do something else? We got something for you. And that was, at that moment in time, it was things like prototyping, user participation, iterations, workshops, incremental delivery. And I always say this is where the experimenting started, and until today, it never stopped. And that's maybe what I like a lot. But for me, what started also was, and now I'm coming back to the team, delivering value. So if you go in there, you check what the organization needs. The first start, the overall value, I always call it the journey. What's the journey that we're looking for? And that's what we go for. And it helps me because it makes my client happy. It makes the people at my client's office happy. But it also means that you really can do something, right? And it helps you in the process to set priorities on everything. And so often, we are not only over time and over budget, but we're also delivering the wrong stuff very often because you have all those misunderstandings in that process, right? So I started working in a different way. And I thought at that moment in time, okay, how can I avoid the basic problems? And yesterday I did it as well. And I hope or maybe I hope you don't, but let's say you recognize this one, right? This is where we are. And we know what this is, right? It's horrible, but it's the waterfall. And people, years ago, people would say, you're always so negative about the waterfall. And then I said, no, waterfall, and you can do this. And these days I said, no, waterfall sucks. And that's what it is, nothing else. And now let me tell you why. This is a very, very, very simple, where you go for analysis, functional design, technical design, development, test, UAT, and maybe all this other stuff, right? And what I did in that, and that last project of mine was very helpful from that perspective. Because, what we had, people talk to the client here, whoever the client was. And then you get this flow, right? And it was, for me, I was just part of it. And I think everybody does, there are people, you come into a new office, right? It was a new client for me. And they tell you, this is how it works. And you start working like this. But then after a while, you think, what the hell's going on, right? And you see this. And this is the typical remote communication, right? Someone talks to the client, then the client disappears in the vague distance. There's a document made out of it that's sent to someone else. He makes another document out of it, send it to someone else. Here I was, making another document out of it. And then I thought, hold on, this guy or girl here, in my case, it was a guy. He or she, they can read this as well. So what is the value here? And also, and this is really for me so important to make that clear, you have interpretations and assumptions. The moment that even now, right? I'm talking, every one of you is making interpretations and assumptions of my words, right? And this is on the written communication, same thing, right? So you write down your own interpretation and assumptions, someone else is reading it, making their own interpretation, and et cetera, et cetera. So you stack interpretations and assumptions on each other. And the one thing that interpretations and assumptions share, they're wrong. And it's very simple. And they're never right. They're wrong. You can be maybe close, but they're wrong. So the first thing that happens in this whole process is that we have a lot of misunderstandings, because we have a lot of people talking about what needs to happen, but they don't talk to the client anymore. So the further down the line you go, the further away you move from what that client ever meant here. And this process is also having another problem, right? So we talk to someone, then we take time to make a document out of it, writing. We send it to someone, waiting until this person takes it from the inbox, reading it, making interpretations and assumptions, making another document out of it. And then it goes to another inbox. And this process is time. I started always with copy pasting a whole shitload of information out of this into a new template. So basically what I want to tell to you, what I want to say, it's extremely inefficient. And there is no way in the world you can say it is efficient, because it's not, right? You lose so much time here. And if you take that misunderstanding part, right? Even now, and this is the long version of the face-to-face communication, because I do my talk first and then we go into the Q&A. But if you have a question, you can do it right here. And if you have people sitting at the table and you can check on the spot, that doesn't take hours or days or weeks, that takes seconds, right? So you need to move away from the remote or written communication. You need to move away from that sequential process. And then we have one more issue, because we have interpretations and assumptions. And interpretations, it's not twins, it's a triplet, because there's something else in there. And the other one that we call is the estimate, right? Because that client is asking, how much will it cost? When can I get it? Or he states a date, she states a date, right? And then all the way down, it turns always out to be a little bit more complicated. And this one here is always in trouble, because we have less and less time. I've been in situations literally where the amount of time for testing was brought down from 3 months to 1 month. And I've been talking to a QA manager, and I like this story so much. QA, you know what it means, right? Quality assurance, right? So this is the person that assures the quality in the company. And she said to me, she had, I think, 70 testers in her department. And she said to me, oh, you know, Arie, how it is, there was so much pressure from the business. We went live without testing. So what you get is bugs. And now you might say, who cares? We're talking business here. You know, we need to, I mean, if you start any kind of delivery, when you call it a project or an MVP, I don't give a shit, right? The point is, the moment that you start a delivery, what it means is obviously the company or the organization needs it, right? So why should I delay with half a year or a year? Because if I can delay it for a year, obviously we don't need it, right? So the point is here, misunderstandings, you know what it means? Rework. You know what rework means? Time. Inefficiency, you know what it means? Time. Bugs means rework. Time. And time is what we don't have. And the point is, in the past, until a year ago, I would have said, you know, technology, the pace of innovation goes up so much, right? As an organization, you have to be able to respond, because technology can change business models. I would have said, you know, in the last couple of years, you know, it can really, in a couple of months, disrupt business models, and that's what it does. And now with the COVID-19, we can see how fast things go. One of our clients in the Womenity group, because of the whole situation with the lockdown, they lost in 2 weeks. Their revenue was $11 billion a year, US dollars. And they lost 92% of their revenue because of the lockdowns across the globe. You know what that means? $1 billion a month going down, right? This is the business suffering to the max. So what we need to do together, we need to avoid delay. So if anyone is thinking, why are we doing Agile anyway? What's the reason for this? We are doing Agile because we want to avoid delay. And this process embeds delay. That's why it sucks. And this is where we have to be clear on. And I'm not blaming the waterfall, but the mechanisms in there create the delay, period. So we have to calm that. And this is why I say, for me, that Agile is for me an interaction concept. Because if you move away from that remote and written communication and you go to that communication face-to-face, this is where you can avoid the misunderstandings, because I can check my interpretations and assumptions. I don't have all the inefficiencies there. And because I can in Agile also work in a cycle way, and I can do communication practices like pairing, I can improve the quality a lot, right? Now, my focus when I did my change, when I converted, it was in 1994, and it was the business value. And I made clear for myself, okay, I need to know, why am I doing this? So one of my clients gave me a call, I remember this, and he said to me, Arie, can you come up? Because I need a new workflow. That's literally what he said on the phone. I was walking in the building, got a call, and I said, well, I'll come to your desk. Do you have time? Yeah, I have time. So I sat down, and he said, yeah, I need a new workflow. I said, well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Let's just see what it is that you need. And I like to ask that question, what is the one thing that happens if we don't do this? And he said, somebody will be very angry at me. I said, oh, who? He said, the big boss here. It was a 1,700 people organization. I think he was responsible for 500 people of them. And I said, okay, tell me, explain why. He said, well, you know, this and this, and we have an efficiency rate of 84%. And if I don't get to 96, we will get a 12 million euro penalty every year. So then I get my ass kicked. I said, okay. So the point is you have to get to 96%. I said, now I know, this is your business value. We need to improve in such a way that you get to 96%. Improving to 92 has no value. You need to get to that 96. Okay, great. So this has been my focus. This is where I start. And that helps me to identify who to talk to. Who from the business do I need? And I asked him, okay, your people, your own people that work in that process. I need people from every step in that workflow who know exactly what they need under their fingertips, right? Business people. So not POs, because what we do very often, you know, we do this kind of thing, right? We have business, and then here we have a solution development team, and then here we have in the middle the poor PO. It's you know, you don't want to be a PO in this situation, because what happens is you do the same as in the waterfall. You do via communication, and it's via communication, not remote and written, but you know, this person is in the middle with all these interpretations and assumptions going up and down and up and down. And we still have, so what you need to do is you need to get this done. You need to bring them together. That's the PO role, getting people at the table. That means that I have real people from the business talking to the people from the solution development team. So I asked this gentleman, Simon was his name, I said, okay, give me your people. So I got from every step in that workflow, I got a really good representative, someone, okay, I know this and I'm respected by my colleagues. And then I asked Simon, and this is very important for me to always take in, otherwise it still doesn't help. I said, when we work as a team, your people and the solution development team, who can accept or reject what the team is going to make? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, you know, I think I have to run around the building to ask for permission to go live if we make something. And then we started to sort it out. So we had the legal department, we had the communication department, we had the operation department, all groups, people with a responsibility in the organization, not in the future user group of the solution, but people that can either accept or reject what you are making. And I said to him, you know, I want to be as fast as possible. I want to avoid delay, right? What I just said. So that means that anyone who can approve anything, I need those people with me, right? And that's for me where it comes from. So I like to make this model where I say, you know, so here was my client, Simon, and I said to Simon, I need someone, you know, that on behalf of you can make decisions when the team gets stuck. Let's call it the visionary. I said, and then I need your people, and I call them, you know, people from the business, you're the business ambassadors. I need your people that really know how it works. And then I have a PO here. And what does the PO do? My PO organizes the sessions in such a way that those people that do development and test and that kind of thing, that they can, you know, bridge the communication gap, because in that waterfall we have all those different languages. And when you then add business people and you add the legal people and the communication people, they all have their different languages and they don't understand each other, but they need to work together on requirements. They need to work together in a shared responsibility to make sure that you get the value at the end. So they need to understand and they need to be aligned. Right? And then what you do is, and that I like a lot, you identify the people from, I call that the non-functional standards. So that is legal and communication and marketing and operation, whatever other, you know, people that you need, anyone. that can go for accept or reject, right? Where you need to get the approval. And I had a couple of those teams working, but this is where you have the team, agile team smaller, 9 or less. And I had a couple of those teams. You can see business, someone who's really capable of translating it into the requirements with the people. And if there is some requirement, expressed here, we have here interpretations and assumptions. And you can ask simply. Agile is so simple, in my opinion. Right? And of course, we have in the middle Agile delivery lead here. If you have multiple teams, or an Agile project manager in the time that we call it, a Scrum Master here. And then I would have software development team. I would have teams for audit trails. I would have team for education and training. Depending on what needs to happen, you have, and they work all on the same backlog. It's one backlog doing one delivery to the market. It's a full delivery. It's not just software on itself doesn't do anything, right? And that's what we need to understand. Software on itself doesn't do anything. It's the software and the people and how they use it. That's what brings the value into the organization. And those people bring the value, not that, right? Those here are serving the business, right? That's what we talk about. Now, the question is then, okay, if you work like this, how are you going to do this? And we all know the daily, right? The daily routine in my time, we call it the daily achievement meeting. We call it the daily scrum, the daily stand-up, the day start. I don't care how you call it, right? But here we go. So I call this the snowman, right? And this is the belly of the snowman. And the snowman has its origin in DSDM, the Agile Project Management Framework. And those people are in the daily, they have that part of the backlog in every sprint. There's one big backlog and they take it in and they work on. But the point is, how do you avoid those misunderstandings? Because the misunderstandings, how often do you see a happy client really getting, oh, this is not what I want, but this is what I need, right? To get that value, to fulfill my journey. Because the journey only starts after the delivery, because when I have the solution, then I can start creating the value as an organization that I need, right? So you need to have those people together. And this is what I like to do. And this is what I started doing sort of by intuition already in 1994 when we did pilot with the Royal Navy, where we had the future users. This was the big guys from submarines, where we had the future users there, and we had the other people from the non-functional standards. We had the development team, we had workshops, and we got, I like to say, Agile is information at the source. It's you move away from the remote to written to face, but you get it at the source. And when you have someone in the middle, you don't get the information at the source. You have bloody interpretations and assumptions, and you don't want this, right? So where you have your daily, to monitor your progress, we all know this. Then you have this heartbeat, and every 2-3 days, you get this, sort of fast feedback loop. What I like to say. You get, so below the line, so the people from, look at here, communication, legal, in the example that I gave, and the business people. So we make something, and they check. They give feedback based on what can we get the value, and they give feedback. Does it, is it the way it should be? Like we look at for example, the law. Are we complying to the law? Because the law in non-functional standard, it's the same for everyone. It doesn't really change the functionality for the business, but we have to meet the criteria. If not, we can adapt. And this is the one point, right? If you want to get that kind of business agility, and you do a refinement with people, most of the time just a PO, and then at the end of your sprint, you do a demo, what are the chances you think that you get an acceptance? There will be because the first time people see things, there is always, something to say. And the point is really, you can say, yeah, but then we have to really, we have to do better refinement. Yeah, you can refine until you drop, right? But yeah, this is a very fast process. It takes half an hour, every 2 to 3 days, you get together. And the big mistake is always to have a demo as an acceptance meeting at the end of your sprint. You know what the problem is with acceptance meetings? People don't accept. That's the problem. And if they don't accept, you have a delay because you have rework. And you're already at the end of the sprint. So you have a sprint fail. Because if you're at the end of the sprint, you're not ready for production, you have a sprint fail. We don't want to have delay. We want to bring the value to the client ASAP. So what you do is you build your acceptance towards the end of the sprint. So you start in the refinement, and then every 2 to 3 days, you look and you check if you're getting there. First of all, people see it, with creates, the ownership, and people are not feared by it anymore. We call it cold water fear. There's no cold water fear. When they see it the first time it is, but then it goes away. And second, when they give feedback, and the next time they see this feedback back, on the details, they know it's no longer theirs, but it's ours, right? You create that sense of ownership. And this is so important if you are working in an agile way. In the past, those people here and those people here were testing what those people here were making. It's called a user acceptance test for a reason, right? We test. No, fuck off, don't test. I don't like testing. What you do is you get those people together and they work in a shared responsibility. And it's no longer the job to test what they have made. It's their job to make sure to give feedback in such a way that at the end of the sprint, we have a delivery. That's their responsibility. And that's completely different from I'm doing a test, right? It's completely different because if you say I do a test, it means you don't take the responsibility for the delivery. So for me, this is essential. This is how you create, the business interaction, how you create the business value. In the heartbeats every 2-3 days, you can converge to the best possible functionality that you deliver, right? So, and that's really helpful. And if you even in that heartbeat during the sprint can accept changes, because we accept changes even late in the process. Remember, that's what we say, late in development. And why not in a sprint? I don't have a problem. As long as it turns out to be having more value, no problem, right? We can do this because we're always focusing on the value. Now business agility is one, and now the combination with agnostic. Why agnostic? I don't think I've ever been working one methodology only. If I look in hindsight, I didn't know I was, but I started doing pairing in the late 80s. My favorite people to pair with were Paul, Martin, and Saskia. The four of us were pairing very often. And later on, I got into all these kind of workshops, and then the heartbeat is not really written down in any other methodology, I guess. I started adopting these gym practices, then I started adopting the Scrum practice. But why is it so important? And I want to show you something, because we want to avoid delay, right? And when we wrote the manifesto, in my opinion, the world was like this. We had in the group where we had 17 men, right, in Salt Lake. And some of them were focusing on the quality. Remember the bugs that I talked about? Some were focusing on the efficiency. Remember the inefficiencies that we talked about? And some were focusing on the value. And I told you already, this was my maximum focus. And of course, I was working on this, but for me, this was the center of the universe. And I worked with very large groups, and I mean large, like anywhere from 25 to, I think the largest group I worked with was 94. And that snowman that was always my conceptual way of building teams, right? And I'm working with them. And then, of course, you have the team that we know, the belly of the snowman, right? 9 or less, the typical agile delivery team that we have. And then you have people focusing on individuals and pairs. How can I do it myself? If you look, I love talking to James Grenning, for example. James and I have been collaborating this year in June. We had with Humanity, we had a conference with Uncle Bob, James Grenning, John Kern, and myself. I like talking to James a lot about this. The year before we were working together. And he is from, I like to use colors, eh? So this is, like TDD and extreme programming, right? Team level, individual pairs. Here you have Scrum practices, and here you have, I think, lean. You can use on any kind of level. I like to do a personal lean and Kanban back home when I'm having my day of work on my own. We have, for example, here LESS, and we have DSDM and adaptive. Why am I telling this to you? It's very simple, Christoph from Alistair Coburn. The point I want to make is what we did, and I would like to invite every one of you, be open to learn. I see so many people, they use one methodology and they deny the rest. And I think, what the bullshit is this? All these other people, we were there with 17, but there's out so many more. They have beautiful best practices or learnings, and you take them in, and you can see that every methodology has a focus. And some people might not totally agree with me, but this is how I see it. And the way I want to work, and if I'm an agile coach and I'm doing agile transformations, it depends on, you know, where my team or teams or organization have a problem. You know, I can identify the practices that help. So as an agile coach, this is your bloody body of knowledge, right? This is where you go. It's not an easy job. Nobody said it would be, right? This is, and we started explaining to each other, okay, we work differently, but how are we working in a different way? And what do we share? And what we share is this. You know, that's the agile concept. So you go from concept, right, to methodologies, to practices. And this is what you do when you're on the work. You don't do this, you do this. You use practices, right? And a lot of people are not open to this. And this is really becoming an issue. And I want to explain a little bit more about this, but I want to come back to this here. This is agnostic agile. And as a team, if you're in a retro and you identify an issue, you can browse the methodologies, and you can take the practices, and you can combine practices if you like, right? That's working in an agnostic way, and can get you sky high, right? Really interesting. Now, if it's back to having those heartbeats and the dailies and the retros, it's not that complicated, in my opinion, right? It's a very easy job to do. Why is it so difficult then that people get trouble, you know, doing an agile transformation? I want to share a story with you. It's in the late 90s. There was an organization in the Netherlands struggling with their projects all the time. And they asked me, and project number 1, on time, in budget, happy client. Project number 2, on time, in budget, happy client. Project number 3, on time, in budget, happy client. So then you think, hey, now they got it, hey? Now they got it. And then the new CIO came and said, no, we stop working like you because it is so complicated. And I thought, what? It's so complicated? I mean, I put people at the table, and we have flip charts as documentation instead of making those big technical. We keep them, we save them, so we have the documentation. What's going on here? And it took me a while. This is in I think 1997, 1998. And it took me a while to identify what it is that make people say this, because it wasn't true. He was just finding an excuse. And I thought, why? And the reason is the paradigm. Working agile and getting real, the benefits of agile, it means that you have to shift paradigms. Now, the question is, what is a paradigm? And a paradigm, I've been looking at it and I've been reading about it. It's a perception of reality. Listen to this, a perception of reality. And the perception is a progress report is written in MS Word. Documentation is written in MS Word. Decision-making is done by the management about the things they don't understand, because only the people, really who use the solution know what it should do. All those paradigms, including that you have the silos. Okay, we have silos in the organization, and we move it from one silo to the other. We have a toll gate, we have a decision-making process. That's a perception. And we are changing those perceptions, and that's difficult. And there are 2 reasons, because first of all, people have a lot of difficulties just accepting new perceptions, but also that perception of life that you have brings your reflexes, right? And what happens if something goes wrong? And if you start working for agile for the first time, or right, you start changing anything, you don't have the reflexes yet. What happens is that you only have reflexes from the past. And this is why you very often have organizations that go into an agile transformation. As an agile coach, you leave, and then after a year you come back, and I call it innovating backward, because you do something for the first time, or maybe for the second time, it's not perfect, you want to improve, but you don't have any solutions, for agile working. So you start re-implementing old solutions, innovating backward. That's what a paradigm does. I always say paradigms define the reflexes under stress. I'm talking to a lot of people from Australia now, I think. I want to share something with you. They here in South Africa, they have the same problem, right? You drive on the wrong side of the road, right? I'm from the Netherlands. That's, Europe on the right side. Okay, serious. on the right side. I don't know if you've ever been to a country where they drive on the right side of the road. I've been to the UK driving, for example, and it's you know, it looks the same driving on the left side, driving on the right. It looks the same, right? I mean, it's a car, it's a wheel. Okay, it's on the other side of the car, but you know, it's a wheel. We have traffic lights and other cars and bicyclists and motorcycles, and it looks the same, but the rules of the game are different. And the point is, if I get here in Johannesburg, which is not easy traffic, if I get in a car driving without having some proper training sessions before, my problem is that I can, as long as everything goes well, and I'm alone on the road and there's nobody else, then it will go well. I can think, because there's no other traffic, I can think at every junction, okay, what do I do? How does it work? But the moment that something happens, an idiot comes along, right? And I need to, in a reflex, do things. I have only reflexes from driving on the right side of the road. And replacing my reflexes from driving on the right side of the road by reflexes from driving on the left side of the road within the different law sets that you have is not an easy job. And that takes time. And that's something that you should never, ever underestimate. So you have to make that change, right? And you have to build that set of new reflexes. This is why agile coaches are needed. You know, you're going to do deep disruptive change in the organization, right? How are you going to do this? So now there's a lot to say about that paradigm shift. If you want to know more, you can go to my website, arievanbennekum.com or integratedagile.com. But I want to take one thing out of it that always, you know, it boggles me: the leadership team. And the leadership team is always expecting other people to change, and they don't want to change themselves. And I think an agile transformation starts with the leadership team. We know, especially if you're an agile coach, we know that agile starts in the teams. You know, people just start doing it. But at one moment in time, if you want to go into a transformation, it starts with the leadership team. Why? 3 reasons. 3. First of all, most people don't like change. The ones that are doing it, you know, they will do it, right? They are open, but most people will not do this unless they have an overall process, you know, pushing them a little bit that way. So first of all, what the leadership team needs to do is they need to role model agile working themselves, because if the people in the organization watch the leadership team working in an agile way, that's the moment where they say, okay, if they do it, okay, I'll do it too. It helps, right, in making the change. Second, it's very important, you need to facilitate change as a leadership team. I mean, with all due respect, but we, even coaches, we cannot change, you know, another organization. We need to facilitate that change. We all know, every one of us know, that an organization looks like this, right? An organization looks like this. And what do I mean with this drawing is that we have the silos here. We have management on every silo. Here is the corporate management. Here we have the teams, right? And the moment you say, okay, we want to go cross silo working, we have to have approval. We cannot make those people change. So you need that leadership team to help in that change. So the first one is role model. So people, if they see you do it, they will do it more easily. Second, you need to facilitate the disruptive change in the organization. And third, you need to help the organization and the people to build that new set of reflexes. You need to sustain that change and not going back into those old habits. And that's not an easy part, right? In the past, I would use this very often, the permafrost, because this is the layer where you can stop any kind of change in an organization because you bump into it, right? But now I know those people have so much knowledge about the organization, about the business. If you can use this group of people to become the internal agile coaches, you can have the most effective and efficient agile transformation ever, right? So this is the leadership team is really important. If you then, for me, the success factor in agile working is that you have the quality and the discipline in the agile rituals. So the discipline means you do them, you do that daily every day. I meet people say, you know, the daily, we are so busy, we do the daily once a week. And it's not one time that I heard it, eh? Okay, then you didn't get the point about the daily. The heartbeat every 2 to 3 days, not once in a sprint, because you mess up, you get the same problem again. So it's doing them, but also doing them well. and make your daily efficient. Don't, start gibbering about all this other stuff. Now that business agility can be reached. And it's not that difficult, but it requires people to change. And what you need to understand is you cannot change someone else. So if you're an agile coach and you thought you're going to change people, forget about it. You cannot change other people. The only thing you can change is yourself. And that's for everyone. People can only change themselves. If you force people to change, the moment the force is gone, people will go back to the behavior that they want, right? If people themselves are really getting into this change process, then you're okay. So as a coach, you need to invite them to change. But change means getting out of the comfort zone. So if you can have the leadership team enlarging the comfort zone by role modeling agile themselves and by helping to break the silos and change decision-making process, etc., that will help people. But building together as an organization to get that business value, building that kind of new organization, in the organization, in your bones, in the DNA, bringing in those new reflexes is a long way. And most people, in the old situation, especially old thinking, is you had pre-described it all. This is how it is, bam. And now you are this multidisciplined agile professional, and you continuously evolve. And that's difficult for people. People like to hang on. This is why people go from where they were to one methodology, because then it's clear, it's in the book, and this is how it is. And that's not what agile means, right? That's what we need to understand. And I like a phrase that I saw with a client of mine in Bucharest on the wall. And it said, perfect is not a state, perfect is an ambition. So to become perfect, you need to change a lot. To reach your ambition, you need to change a lot. So perfect people change a lot. And if you replace the word perfect by agile, say agile is not a state, agile is an ambition. And to reach your ambition, you need to change a lot. So agile people change a lot. And I think most people, including most agile people, don't like change, right? So you need to be alert. You need to be open to that change, right? This is where we need to go. And you can only change yourself. And I said it, I told the group yesterday as well. I had a very nice conversation. I think it was about 10, 12 years ago with Mr. Kofi Annan from the United Nations. He was retired as a Secretary General of the United Nations. And at the table for an hour and a half chatting. And I asked him at the end of the conversation, I said, this is the time when in Burma, in Myanmar, there was still an economic ban and people really having a difficult time. I said, what should people do? What do I tell my boys if they have a nice idea that would help people out in Myanmar? What do I tell them? And he looked at me and he said to me, tell your boys that change always starts with one person. And this is where I would like to stop my talk and go into the Q&A.
Thanks, Arie.
Neil, back to you.
Yep. Yeah, mate. I'll just add myself to the spotlight. So we're both up on the big screen. We had a few questions coming through, Arie, and I'll sort of curate them along to you. So when you started talking about delivery leads and project managers, there was a few ears pricked up then. And from my experience, and especially in Australia, we've tended to go a bit extreme with getting rid of these dedicated roles that help navigate complexity and get things done, and think it'll all fall into the team or the Scrum Master. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the Agile PM role? I know you were very much involved in the early days of shaping that up in DSDM. How do you see that playing out now in current, more modern, transformations going on currently? Do you still think it's a role? Where do you see it going from?
I mean, if the project manager still has a role.
Yeah, and where it fits into maybe some of the more latest ways of thinking in terms of transitioning to different ways of working. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's one issue with people. If you hear a word from the past, you will apply habits from the past. That's the biggest. I mean, I don't mind if you call your dog Wodan or Vicky or Isabella. I don't give a shit who you call your dog, right? But you need to make sure that you do the right thing. And I was making that drawing of that snowman, and in one agile team you have a scrum master. Okay, if you have 6 teams working together on one delivery of an MVP, how do you call this? And I don't know that these days people have an allergy because we don't do projects anymore. Well, I think if you deliver an MVP, that's a project. But the point is, in the past, what would happen, we would build for that special project, we would build a complete new team, deliver the project and disassemble the team again. And the guy running that team was the project manager, right? With all the old habits. But now you go to stable teams, right? What you call them value teams, I don't product teams, I don't care how you call them. And there will be overall in the delivery process, someone keeping the group together and making sure that all the rituals are taking place on the wider scale. And that could be that agile project manager, if you like. Yeah. Yep. So I know that an organization in Rotterdam, they said, oh yeah, we're going agile, and they literally fired all the project managers. And then half a year later, they would get them back in free in the back door because they needed that expertise, how to run a bigger group. But you need to run it in a modern way and not in the old way. And that's the risk what you have.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks, Arie. There was some other questions. Sorry, yes. Mate, did you want to go on?
Yeah, I was checking the questions in the Q&A. The first one that I saw on top when I was reading was from Nikki saying, driving example, she liked the driving example. Can you please talk to this unlearning of behaviors when you introduce agile in new organization? Yeah, and the impact on delivering agile and adding value. The learning and the unlearning are extremely important. I want to give an example. I was in a client of mine and we did transformation. Was really going well, and then I walked down the hallway somewhere, and one of the developers I just met in an elevator on the way to another floor, and he was looking not happy. I said, "Hey mate, how's going on?" And he said, all those meetings. I said, 60% of my time. I said, "What do you mean?" I mean, you have a daily, you have a heartbeat, you have a retro refinement. What's going on? And then it turned out they still had all the old project meetings as well, and this is unlearning. And as a coach, I think. Maybe Nikki, that's part of the answer. What you need to understand, I think, and I got it from a client of mine, and I love this phrase. He said, "An agile transformation, the success factor is don't compromise." And this is why I said about those rituals. This is what it is. But you need to be very clear as a coach. So the other ones are gone now, right? We don't do progress meetings anymore. Unlearning is not an easy thing for all of us, right? I mean, check yourself out, right? Cross your arms. Now cross them the other way. And if in a minute I say to you, cross your arms, right? And then the other way, you still. I mean, it takes time to learn, right? Unlearning.
And Arie, I'm interested in leadership. There was a couple of questions there around resistance to change, and you mentioned leading with. Starting off with the leaders, and you mentioned also to take a very practice-based view of it. Is that how you generally start with the leaders, to change their practices rather than sitting in roundtable workshops talking about mindsets or theories? Can you maybe open up on that one a little bit more?
Yeah, I'm not much of the huffy fluffy talk. I always start with the leadership because I talked about the role modeling, right? So that means for me in a transformation, the leadership team is ahead of the rest of the organization. People can see what's going on, right? And for me, a leadership program starts always, day number one in a leadership program is understanding how your people, it's a basic agnostic agile training that I do with the leadership teams. They have to understand how it works in the teams. And the second day or session, whatever you call it, is about, okay, this is how they work. So what do they need from you as a leadership team? And
so very practical, very practical.
Yeah, and once they know how the teams work and they know what they need, and I know that knowledge is not deeply embedded yet, but at least they know and they have a fallback and they have coaches next, and that's the moment when teams can go into transformation, because then you can start.
Yeah,
in my opinion, that's how I like to work.
Yeah, no, because that's very helpful, because as a coach, often we get caught between this idea of doing these deep, fluffy offsites versus just pragmatically changing the behaviours of the leaders. So it's a refreshing take on that. Sam, how are we going for time? I just want to manage our time box, mate.
Good.
We've got another 2 minutes. Fine.
If there's more questions for Arie, go for it. Otherwise,
yep. Okay. Well, resistance to change did come up, if you noticed there. Obviously, Arie, you've worked at very large organisations, both with teams and all through. How do you generally deal with resistance to change?
I learned a lesson there because I know that Ignacio asked me how much resistance have I experienced in every transformation, in every training. There is resistance, and lucky for me. But imagine this in the mid-90s, doing masterclasses on this way of working. I had people from banks that would say, it's impossible. If you do that in a bank will be bankrupt in a month. This kind of stupid talk I have to fight. And handling resistance is two ways. First of all, I learned my lesson that I spend time on people that resist, of course, but I don't spend all my time on it. And that's a pitfall, because they very often can ask a lot of time from you. And you give them all your time and you forget about the rest, right? Don't do that. And I always say a success will prove itself. So if you work with the rest of the team and you're getting there, right, then they at one moment in time will join you. Not everybody. And agile transformation is not for 100%. And the other one with that is when people are really not wanting it, I just invite them, join for 2 sprints. Just join for let's see. We do it together, but then we do it real. And then after two sprints, if you don't like, okay, you can go out, talk to your management and go out. But I would like to, on one hand, you pay attention, but not too much, because you have 20 people that are 2 naysayers and 75% of your time is to the naysayers. And that's where you don't want to go. And the other one is, one of the solutions that I like is just invite people for a short time. We're going to do this. It's a choice as an organization. So let's do it. And that's helpful. I remember, one of the feedback forms over 20 years ago, I had people from the KLM, the airline in the Netherlands. Very nice, but it doesn't work for our company. Right, great. Never done it, but that was the feedback form, right, at the end of the masterclass. Today, KLM is agile. Working agile, trying to be agile, right? Doing the transformation work, having the coaches, etc. So sometimes, if you get a green banana, it's not nice. You have to wait a little bit, right? And then it becomes yellow, and then it gets. Sometimes you have to give things time. You cannot talk a banana into being yellow. It takes time.
And it's an interesting one where you talked about paradigms and leaders and the way they perceive their reality. Is it sometimes best to wait out to see if the leaders have a shift, or do you actively work on that, or do you wait for the banana to ripen on its own?
Well, you plant seeds all the time, but what I wanted to say in terms of as a coach, you have to be strict. If you go into that paradigm shift and you apply let's say the new rules of the game, right? We were in waterfall, now we're going into agile working, and you agreed on a set of practices to work from. Then okay, this is how we work for now. In the retrospective, we can improve if we want, but this is how we work. And if people don't show up, I get pissed off, and I'm not nice. I'm not friendly. This is also why before I go into the delivery sprints, I always set up with the team a collaboration agreement. When we do the dailies, when do we do the heartbeats, and we have fixed moments in the week, Wednesday at 11 or something like this. And you're there. Everybody is there. And I go to the other departments, from the legal department and the marketing department, talk to the manager. I want someone from your organization, from your team, who is empowered on behalf of your department to make decisions here and to accept or review and give feedback. And then work accordingly, right? And that's for me. And then be strict. You cannot do half-half, because if you do half-half, organizations don't get the benefits of agile working. And that is why you do an agile transformation, right? They ask you to do so.
Yep. All that's gold, people on the call. Hopefully you're writing copious notes, because for me, it's really refreshing to hear someone who's worked at the highest levels in large organizations saying, look, folks, we're not there to make friends. We're there to be strict about what we're trying to achieve. People need to show up after they're invited. If they don't, then they won't get that value. That's the thing they've purchased from us, isn't it? The transformation outcomes. Great stuff, great stuff. Well, unless there's any questions that anyone wants to quickly throw in the chat, we will say thank you to Arie, and we will move on and bring in our next speaker. So I think we are just about ready to do that. So thank you, Arie. We'll give you a virtual applause, I suppose, however we do it. And
I hope the people liked it, and I wish you a nice conference, right? Enjoy your time here. And I just want to say, Neil, that yesterday we had the China, Southeast Asia. Today is Australia. And if you can find time in your calendar and you want to spend the night in front of your laptop. Next week, Thursday, there will be the EMEA session, and on December 9th, there will be the Latin America session with Jeronimo Vargas also in the lead. We talked there, for example, with Alistair Coburn. At the EMEA conference, there is Natasha McMahon talking about the business continuity model in combination with agile working. So I really invite you. I mean, it's for free, so if you like, go in there and
yeah, it's worth staying up with a cup of coffee or a beer or whatever you're
exactly.
whatever you want.
Okay,
Thank you very much. Thanks, Arie.
Bye-bye.
Okie doke. So we are going to move on in our session now and bring in Sam Zawadi. I've worked with Sam for quite a prolonged period of time on a large transformation. We had an absolute ball together. And Sam is very much the person that would be running around coaching and helping and supporting everybody, and is agnostic through and through, because he draws from his depth of experience to basically solve the problem at hand. And I don't think we've ever had one of those conversations where you find yourself talking about agile frameworks. We're always talking about the problems we're trying to solve. And I think that's what this whole movement was born about. It's let's drop that language and taxonomy and talk about what the business is asking us to do, which is get stuff working, get stuff done, and deliver value. So welcome, Sam. I'll hand it over to you, buddy, and you can take us through your talk. There we go. You are spotlighted, my friend.
Thank you, Niall. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Isn't it great how we can come to a conference like this virtually and start talking about things like agile transformations and resistance to change, and then all of a sudden start talking to bananas, and even spending the night with Arie van Bennekum himself. I think it's great. So welcome, and thank you for being here. I'm going to give a little bit of a different talk today. It's a slight departure from what I'm usually used to giving, and hopefully it will help to add some diversity and color to both Arie's talk and Peter's talk, who's next. So hopefully you can see my screen. I want to talk about brave spaces, and I actually want to pivot from the concept of psychological safety just for a second. Just bear with me. And instead, I want to emphasize the importance of bravery and courage, because I believe that we need bravery and courage to rise to the challenges of genuine dialogue and meaningful change when we're talking about agile transformations. And I believe that in order to challenge, we have to be brave. And in order to brave, we have to risk something. So it's not safe. Inherently, it's not safe. And that's why I want to talk about this idea. And I'd love to start a conversation about this afterwards as well, of course. So, agnostic agile, 12 principles. When I first, this was born actually in late 2016, and I was working in a company called AMIA, and I was working with about 2 or 3 great agile coaches, one of them who I host a podcast with. And we just started noticing all of the anti-patterns that Arie mentioned in his talk, right? Religiously sticking to certain ways of working when it didn't fit the client, creating this resistance, and so on and so forth. We all know that story. So when I took agnostic agile to Arie, he just almost, like, figuratively speaking, jumped out of his chair. He was like, "This is what I've been saying all along." And I'm like, "I'm so glad you like it." So we had a great time in those early days, and that was only around 4 years ago or so. And that brings us, right till today. And it's so amazing to see this conference happening, possible. And before I actually start, I just want to say thank you to the team that was behind bringing you all of this, because thankfully we're delivering it. And a lot of work goes into this stuff, guys, a lot of late nights because of the different time periods and so on. So thank you for the team. Thank you. And thank you guys for coming. Thank you everybody for coming. So agnostic agile started roughly 4 years ago. So what's happened? What is agnostic agile's place in the world? Well, the thing that amazes me is that it's become both commercially and intuitively accepted by the industry. We see some of the biggest training organizations in the world base their training acquisitions on agnostic agile, as in being agnostic with agility. One size doesn't fit all, and so on. So I think that's probably the biggest nod to agnostic agile that we can get and we could have hoped for. But more important than that for me, we see people, you know, working this way, thinking this way, writing articles, making their own videos, going to meetups, and just naturally talking about this idea of we need to kind of move away from these set frameworks, these set ways of working, and we need to move more into a space that is highly contextual for our customers, highly contextual for the organizations that we work in. And I think that is fundamental to business agility, fundamental. There is no organization where you can pick up, for example, the Spotify model and just drop it on an organization and just transition it in like that. It's not going to work. Things need changing, things need adapting. What the organization does is different. The people are different. They're at a different place. We need to meet them where they are, not where a framework assumes they are. And I think that's probably the biggest nods to myself personally about agnostic agile. And it's so great to see it out in the world now. And it's so great we're here doing this. So business agility, which is the theme of this conference. There's one particular thing about agnostic agile that I think really resonates with business agility. And ironically, as I'll talk about later, I think that is also the very thing that we need more of, not less of. And that thing is the mention of software or technology. Agnostic agile has no mention of software or technology at all. It's basically a code of ethics, and it's a fantastic code of ethics that you can apply in any kind of job you're doing, actually, whether it's agile or not. I think it can easily be transferable. But it hasn't based itself in software. And that's slightly different to the Agile Manifesto, which is rooted in software for very good reason. Now we come and we look at business agility. What is business agility? Well, this quote is from the Business Agility Institute's website. It says, business agility is the capacity and the willingness of an organization to adapt to, create, and leverage change for their customers' benefit. It's great. It's natural, it's intuitive. Like Arie was saying, I kind of personally have always thought like this anyway. It makes sense, which is why I think it's really becoming a big thing now. But what's at the center of business agility and why are we doing all of this? The customer. It is for the customer's benefit we are doing all of the things that we do. We serve the customer, we delight the customer. If it wasn't for the customer, we wouldn't be in business. And it's another point I want to come back to as well, the name, business agility. The promise of business agility is essentially to enable an organization to become nimble, to enable it to connect with itself and with the market forces that drive it, and with its customers, being fluid. But I think business agility is more organizational agility for me. And the reason I say that is because not every organization is a business, but every organization does need agility. So if I could just change one thing, or the way I explain business agility is more along the lines of an organization, making it slightly more generic, making it slightly more agnostic, because I think that makes sense. Agile isn't about software anymore, because in order to enact the values and principles of the Agile Manifesto today, we have to consider so many other things. A software development team or product development team within a large enterprise, a legacy enterprise, needs more things around it to enable it to be agile. And for me, that's where business agility comes in. It unlocks the locks all around the team. It undoes the constraints. It addresses those obstacles, those blockers, and it enables the team to be autonomous, to be agile, to deliver, and so on. So that's the idea for me of business agility. as well as responding to those market forces. And I actually call that creating an enabling space for the team. A team needs space to thrive. And in an enterprise, traditional enterprise, teams are suffocated more than they should be. And I see business agility as the breath that the teams need in order to deliver value. For me, it's like a communications protocol. It enables large organizations to interact with itself, with different parts of itself, in a much more nimble and effective way. But at the heart of business agility, at the heart of Agile, are people. And I really want to pick this idea up from Arie, because he mentioned that a few times, and bring it into my presentation. We cannot change people. People must change for themselves. And in my view, we have all these organizations embarking on these agile transformations, but most of them are doing the same thing. They're trying to change people. Change is being done to people. And I think that's a big mistake. And I think that we need to give people the chance, the platform, to co-create the transformation with us. And I'll talk more about that later. We've got many theories of change management. John Cotter starts with a sense of urgency. William Bridges starts with endings and he ends with new beginnings. Edgar Sheen talks about learning anxieties and survival anxieties. Now, I think these are amazing established works and people. They're legends in their own right. But in a pandemic, I don't really want to be talking about anxieties and urgency in order to provoke me to do something. I don't think those are the right words, and I don't think it's good for people's mental health either. So I'm really thinking contextually here. However, the effect of those things is to get people to act. And in a change world, in an agile transformation, we want that action. We need people to act. But we can't tell them to act. It has to come from within. And this is what I want to focus on. People have to have the volition to act. So how do we get them to that point? How do we get them to a place where they say, damn, I want to change this. We need to change, guys. We need to do something. I've rarely seen that from the people doing the work in an agile transformation. And I want to see more of it. So then, if it's not anxieties, urgency, and such, what can be a useful terminology that we're already familiar with that we can use to help articulate this need for people to act, this want that has to come from the people doing the work? More on that in a bit. I've kind of touched on it already, but I think there is a problem with agile transformation. And I'll start off by saying agile transformations, generally speaking, there are always exceptions. They seem to be a push rather than a pull. When you push things on people, despite whatever it is, whether it's a deadline, I need something by next week, the product owner isn't happy with this, could you think you could change that by the end of the day, whatever it might be, you're creating resistance. Despite the relationship you have with that person could be your best friend outside of work. You're still creating a psychological resistance. And what that does, if it happens frequently enough, and if it's on a scale as big as an agile transformation, then what you're also going to create is what I call organizational incongruence with the people doing the work. You're going to start alienating them, and they're going to start doing things half-heartedly or passive-aggressively or not at all. They'll just make your life hell. I think we might have all experienced that for those of us who have worked in a large enterprise transformation and even a medium to large. So people need to feel that they want change, and they need to feel that in their hearts as well as their minds. question is, how do we get them to that point? I quoted a definition from the Business Agility Institute as to what business agility was, how you define it. But notice something about that. It talks about organizations, it talks about customers, it talks about better ways of doing stuff. It doesn't talk about people. And I think we need to change that, guys. We need to completely flip this on its head. I love the DSDM framework, the Agile PM framework that Arie briefly took you through in terms of the snowman. I've been using it for years. And one of the things that blew my mind about that was the DSDM triangle. Because my background is in project delivery. And in project management, you have the fixed thing is the scope, basically. In DSDM, it's flipped on its head completely. So you've got time and cost, which is fixed, but the scope is flexible. It makes so much sense, right? Just as I had that aha moment all those years ago, back then, I'm also having this aha moment about business agility. I think it does need to be flipped a little bit, and I want to challenge it. People, if we don't mention the people doing the work in large agile transformations, in my opinion, we failed. Because you're going to get resistance and you're going to meet all that traditional ways, all those ways people can say no without actually saying no. And that's what we've all experienced, and that's what we'll continue to experience until we co-create the transformation with the people doing the work. A simpler way of saying that is, what if I don't resonate with my company's values? What happens then? What if I don't resonate as a software developer or a HR person or a salesperson or a support person? What if I don't resonate with this transformation? I don't really agree. What do I do then? What path do I have? You see? So we need to get people on that path of resonance, of congruence, of belief. And this is more than buying into a transformation for the greater good. This is about the belief system that someone has. And is that belief system the same as what the organization's vision is? Is there a match there? Because if there is, I guarantee you people work in nights and weekends to get things done, because it's coming from the heart, not just from the mind. So it always interests me, how can we get people to that point? To summarize, I question, is Agile really working the way we want it to, especially in large enterprises? Anecdotal reports from all over the world. We all have large networks. We know what goes on. We keep our eye on the industries. And they're all pointing to something very similar. Whenever you have large transformations, leadership. It always is about leadership. Arie said it, 1,000 people before him have said it, and will say it after me as well, and Arie. Because when you get to a certain level and you're dealing with a certain level of executive, for example, you will encounter human selfishness, psychopathy, greed, control, resistance, and so on. The higher up you get in an organization, the more you experience these things. And what that surmises to is politics. So how can we circumvent this? Well, I believe the answer lies in the people. And the whole theme for me today, talking to you, are two things really, or three maybe. Connection with people, connection with the organization, connection with the leadership, people themselves doing the work, co-creating the transformation, and technology enabling the transformation, which we'll talk about a little bit as well. I worked in a large organization relatively recently. And this organization is going through a global transformation. And when I started there, I did my due diligence. I went around to all the teams, introduced myself, explained how I could help them, wanted to know how they thought I could help them. And I got to this question and I asked them, you're doing all this wonderful work. Who is it for? And they're like, what do you mean, who is it for, Sam? I'm like, well, forgive me, I don't really understand. I can't really see the bigger picture right now. Who is your customer? And I kid you not, they looked at it, the 2 or 3 people I had in the room, they looked at each other and they say, do you mean the end customer? And I say, yes. Not the internal customer. I said, no, not the internal customer, not the product owner down the road or down the hallway. Who is the end customer? And what is this solution we're developing? Pretend I'm somebody off the street. Explain it to me. They didn't know. And I was taken aback. This is how complex and huge on a scale that means transformations by themselves won't work unless they're really helped and enforced by leadership across the organization. It's hard, guys, is what I'm trying to say. It's really hard. If you don't have cross-functional teams, or what I say, in large enterprises, I don't think you can ever get 100% cross-functional teams. If the enterprise has a rich heritage and a legacy of working the way they worked for years, for decades, you're not going to get cross-functional teams in a year. You will if you're lucky. So I usually use the idea of cross-functional teams as a spectrum. How cross-functional can we make them? Let's try our best. Let's push it as far as we can. So if we're lucky, within a relatively short term, we can get to maybe 70, 80% cross-functional, right? There are still handoffs, there are still dependencies, there are still delays, because we still have a siloed organization. That's not going to go away in 3 months. That's going to take a lot more time, if ever. So if you don't know who your customer is, I think you've got a problem, right? That's the first thing. And business agility is all about centering yourself around delighting that customer. The other thing is, when things tend to go, when transformations tend to execute, and everyone's got their energy and that buzz, and we do presentations and we're excited, and it's a great feeling. I love that feeling. And then one of the announcements is, and guys, we're going to send you all on certified agile training, whatever that framework might be. Whenever that's said, a little bit of my heart sinks, because it's great to have certifications. It's great for individuals to learn. But what we end up doing, we don't create a learning environment. We create a training environment. And that's not what we want. We want, remember the enabling space I mentioned? Well, that includes learning. And I think it's healthier and it's better to create a learning space rather than wheel in trainers and instill a framework on people. This is how it works. And expecting that framework can come back into the organization and run like clockwork. That's like saying, that's like trying to install brand new apps on an old legacy operating system and expecting the apps to run fast and effectively and smoothly. It's not going to work, guys. The batteries won't fit. And this is just a thought I had. Sometimes it's better to rethink and rebuild things, not to transform them. What I'm not saying is that we shouldn't do agile transformations. Absolutely not saying that. We should do them and we should keep doing them. But sometimes, just as you'd set up a value stream, for example, we wouldn't just continue working with a value stream that's got a lot of delay points and is inefficient and so on. We actually want to start rethinking how we do this from scratch, because it's better that way. It's easier, actually. Sometimes this might be worthy of thought. So what are the basic ingredients for success for any transformation? This is my suggestion. I suggest that the answer is among all of you. I'm not here to tell you what the answer is. I can't do that. I don't know your contexts. I don't know where you work. I don't know the challenges you're facing. But what I can tell you is this. People doing the work should be co-creating the transformation. And why is that? If I'm in a team, a generic team, I'm producing value, but I know how I need to get my value done. I know how I need to deliver my work. And it involves going to this team and this team and this team, and then waiting for India to wake up or the UK to wake up or whatever it might be, before I can get anything across my Kanban board, right, to done. So I know the pains I have to go through. When I've been in that situation with teams, rather than saying, all right, guys, you know what, I've thought about it. I think we should work like this. And then I show them a nice diagram on my iPad. Rather than doing something like that, I want to create a workshop and I want them to tell me, hey guys, if you could change this, if you could restructure this area so you could get your work done, how would you do it? Right? How would you do it? Because I'm here to enable you. And that is my stance. And I believe that is how we should run agile transformations, from the people. Because I'll tell you this, if it isn't the people doing the change and co-creating the change, it's going to be the status quo. One or the other, guys. It's either the people or the status quo. And what we typically call, what I would call, quote unquote, loosely speaking, real change comes from the grassroots, comes from the people doing the work. And what is commonly called fake agile is that whole lipstick thing, It doesn't come from the people. So that's my first suggestion, people. My second suggestion, and this is food for thought. I really want to put this out there because I really want the community to think about this. We don't have any technology enabler for agile. All of the work we're doing is kind of consultant type work, right? Like it or not, we're consultants, right? For those of us who go into organizations and we help people and we help coach them, whatever we might do, it's a consultative approach at the end of the day. What we don't have, and by the way, what the Business Agility Institute's definition of business agility doesn't mention is technology. And that surprises me. And the reason it surprises me because I find it highly ironic, given that the Agile Manifesto is rooted in software, right? And in 2020, right now we're using technology. I believe we should think about how we might use a technology platform to enable agility. I don't think this has been thought about before, not that I know of. And I think it's a space that we need to start filling up with ideas. So I want to put that out there. And of course, thirdly, we have to be agnostic, guys. Any kind of change, any kind of transformation, whatever work you're doing with teams, we know it just makes so much sense. One size doesn't fit all, right? You have to know enough about ways of working and agile and change, I believe, in order to co-create ways of working with the teams. And in order to do that, well, that's an agnostic position by default, right? Whether or not you want to wear the agnostic agile badge, it doesn't matter. The point is that's the mindset you have to have in order to affect change. Just on the topic of certifications, I believe that certifications are very useful. But for agile transformations, they can be a double-edged sword. They can offer you knowledge and inspiration, but they can also offer you very little, and they can also offer you false hope. In fact, the more certification somebody has these days, the more dubious I become on how well that person can deal with the realities and the practicalities of transformation and change, let alone delivery. It's just something I've become more acutely aware of. On the other side, I think people should do certifications, but I think they should do them for the right reasons, which is learning. I'm all about learning spaces, right? I love learning spaces. By giving this talk, I'm going to learn something. And learning for me is more valuable than getting trained to skill up, right? So, because when you learn, you start to connect dots. Your mind is free to do that. But when you're getting sent on a training course to learn something specifically, you're kind of getting boxed in from the beginning. So learning is great. We should all do more of that. I just want to talk about one more thing. And before I do, I want to posit to you 3 axioms, 3 statements, which I believe to be true. We each possess 3 qualities. These qualities become much more important when we belong to a community. And an organization is a community. A business is a community. So I want to go back to a point that I was hinting at earlier. What idea, what concept, what philosophy do we already have in society that we can reuse to help articulate this need to unite people? To unite people who want to change, rather than, in my opinion, the slightly more dated, creating a sense of urgency and anxieties, right? Well, I think there is an idea like that out there. It's been with us for centuries, maybe even for millennia. It's called citizenship. We already have this idea, this philosophy we all live by. It's invisible, but it's here. It's called citizenship. It's something we already understand. And I think the idea of a citizenship, when we talk about agile, is perfect. I think it's beautiful because it denotes a sense of belonging, of respect, of responsibility for the whole, not just the sum of its parts. In other words, it promotes all the things we love in the agile and lean communities. Systems thinking, autonomy, servant leadership, doing good for the community, helping each other, advancing society, and so on. These are the qualities I believe Agile needs right now. I strongly believe we need those qualities. And I believe that 3 things, the 3 axioms: purpose. We all need a purpose. Every person in our organization, we intrinsically drive the success of our transformation. Identity. We're all unique. I believe that's a true statement too. Action. We need to take action in transformations. Every person has a contribution to make. I don't care if you're in the C-suite or you're wiping the floors. You have a contribution to make to the whole. You're a citizen. And I think this is just such a powerful idea. And you can probably hear in my voice how passionate I am about this idea. Because I believe the bigger picture will save us. We will save us. We will make things better in organizations, for our customers, for clients, and for society as a whole. I believe that every person is an agile citizen. We are connected to each other. We are connected to things. We are connected to the whole. And I want to introduce this concept to you here today, the concept of the agile citizen. It's an idea, as I said, that we all belong to a community of people who want to enable each other, who want to enable change from within, who want to really see it work, who have it in their hearts to really see it work because they resonate with what's going on. They resonate with the organization, with the transformation, with the objectives, with delighting the customer. So they want it to work. And if people want it to work, it will work. They will make it work. Just like they'll get that delivery out the door by next week, you better believe they're going to make this work if they want it to work. Our success as organizations lie in the people doing the work. Without them, you don't have an organization. So what are some of the features? What might be some of the features of an agile citizen? Identity. I think it's important we all have a unique identity. We all bring something new to the table. I've learned so much from people around me. I've learned so much from the different teams I've worked with. Purpose, probably one of the most important things. We need purpose because purpose drives us. Dan Pink, autonomy, mastery, purpose, it all plays into here. Congruence, this idea of resonating, this harmonious resonance that I have, this belief I have that the organization I'm working for is doing the right thing. They're on the right track. I want to be part of that journey. I need to believe that. That will give me purpose as well. And lastly, I think one of the big qualities we need to have as agile citizens is this idea of active citizenship. We need to take action, be active, contribute, hold learning dojos, whenever we want, whenever works. Feel brave enough to speak out when we disagree with something. Altogether advance the organization and the people, our peers that we work with, towards the greater good, towards the vision, towards the transformation, towards those benefits, because that's what we want, right? We want to delight the customer. So I believe Agile Citizen connects people and it connects things together because it's about how you as a person contribute to the greater good. The irony, of course, is we're all connected through technology anyway. It doesn't matter about the distance. And yet somehow, even though we are connected through technology, there is still a feeling of being unconnected at the same time because we may not be aligned in our thinking about the greater good. We may not be aligned on how we're doing this transformation or even why we're doing it. So this idea of community, of citizenship, I believe this is the kind of thinking we need to approach transformation and change with. I often work with remote teams, more often than not, as probably most of you do. I'm remote myself now, right? Here's the funny thing. To the remote teams, you're the one who's the remote team. Consider that, right? And whenever I work with remote or distributed teams, more often than not, they're spread out all over the world. I once worked with an organization back in London where we had our product people in London, in the London office. Our testers were in one city in India. Our vendor developers were in another, and kind of the business logic people were yet in another. And just to make it a little bit worse, not even one team was in the same city. So the vendor developers were actually split themselves. These are not remote teams, guys. These are not distributed teams. I call these teams dislocated teams. You've dislocated them from the body, from the development. When we have situations like this, it doesn't matter how good your Scrum knowledge is or how good your ways of working are. It's not going to fix the fact that you're not going to be able to get product to market out in time because you've got distributed teams which are themselves dislocated. So they need to rethink. And that's kind of what I mean when I said before, sometimes it's better to think about rebuilding things than to transform them. Sometimes it might be an easier path of least resistance.
Sam, I want to leave time for questions, buddy. So yeah, we've got a few minutes left before, we just got to wrap up, get Pete on. Yeah.
Oh, Peter, can't wait for him. It's going to be great. I'll finish up now, Niall.
Thanks.
I also work with non-IT teams. In fact, most of my work has been with non-IT teams over the past 5 years. And the funny thing is, a lot of the IT systems we have, the tech we have, it's disjointed. There are different vendor systems and so on. So again, it doesn't matter how good our ways of working are. If it means that we're in the organization and we can't deliver something to market because simply by virtue of the fact that our technology stack means we can only release every 4 or 5 months, what good is the best ways of working in the world, right? This is what I mean about technology. Let's have a think about that, about how technology could enable agility. Let's enable us, right? Our organizations are constantly thriving. They're changing, they're evolving. And you, as an agile citizen, have a responsibility to help guide your organization's evolution, towards fulfilling its truth, its transformation purpose, the betterment for its clients. And as Arie said, again, change comes from within, with volition and with want. We live in a world, a connected world of unconnected things. But damn it, we can connect them, and we will connect them. So I want to leave you with this. It's a call to action. I would love to have a dialogue with everybody. I'm in Melbourne right now, but I can be time zone agnostic. And I would love us to discuss this idea of agile citizenship in our communities, in our meetups, and so on. If you go to www.theagilecitizen.com, you'll find more about it. I actually set that website up right at the end of December last year, but I haven't done anything with the concept, with the idea. So this is the first time you're hearing about it. Thank you very much. And lastly, I hope we can all seek that brave space together and hold it and greet each other as fellow Agile citizens working for the greater good. Thank you for listening. Thanks, Niall.
Yeah, that's awesome, buddy. That's really great stuff to hear people really tipping it out from the heart. And Sam ran, a lot of these sorts of thoughts and concepts past me a little while ago, and it was just a breath of fresh air for me. I was coming off a pretty heavy piece of work and felt disconnected, not aligned to the purpose of the organization. I felt like I was a lonely individual in amongst thousands of people all supposedly doing something together. And the agile citizenship, concept for me really allows us to connect on purpose and do it together, co-design it together, and move forward together as a movement, as opposed to having things pushed onto you and done to you. So it's a very powerful idea. And really that's Sam's gift, if you like. It's to be working really close to what's going on. And once he gets a bit of space, he can have these insightful reflections on the gaps in the whole paradigm that is agile. So thank you for sharing, Sam. I really appreciate it and value your thoughts there, buddy. And we do have a few minutes for questions until we go to Pete. There's just been a truckload. We've been swamped with questions, Sam, which I think is great because at the onset, before we came on today, Sam said, I'm out to do a provocation today. I'm out to perturb the audience. I want to wobble you all a little bit to wake us all up. And I think that's certainly what you've done in the Q&A panel there, mate. So maybe there was a lot in here. There was all the way from basic things around common language, around if we're so agnostic, how do we have a common language? And doesn't training allow us to baseline ourselves on a set of languages and then we can move forward? So maybe some comments around, not being dogmatic about agnostic agile even, right? How to take people on the journey. Don't programmers need a common programming language to discuss their trade and craft? Maybe you can respond to that briefly.
Yeah, that's a great observation. I'll start with the agnostic agile one. One of the reasons that we haven't pushed agnostic agile at all on anybody, or really we haven't even really promoted it that much, it was very organic, the growth, was for that reason, because we realized if we started to want people to buy into this idea of agnostic agile uppercase, that is almost a contradiction in terms, right? So it's something that we each just wanted to put out there in the world and see what happens to it. And that, my intention from the very beginning was that. And that's basically why it's nothing more than what you see in the agnosticagile.org website, right? There's not much there. In fact, there used to be a blog there, which we've stopped, and we're just going to rip that page out and just make it a standalone piece, because it's meant to provoke, it's meant to get people to think. It's not meant to force, nudge, or coerce, or encourage even anyone to join it. There's nothing to join, right? So it's just an idea, and the idea is based on all of our beliefs and practical experiences. So that's what I say about agnostic agile. And about the programming and the common platform, of course, I think it's really interesting when you start applying the idea of being agnostic with technology and ways of working, but especially with technology in the programming world. Because remember, the definition of agnostic agile is simply, we want to be agnostic in terms of ways of working, And we don't believe that one way of working is always the right thing to do for everybody, right? So apply that reasoning when it comes to technology and programming. I think it can loosely apply. Of course, you need common platforms. We all have these base classes that we pull down from, that we extend, right? And we fill up with code, right? They're not going away. But if you think about it, an abstract object, God, I haven't been a software developer in a very, very long time, so don't laugh at me. But an abstract object, when you're extending the object, right? The object is agnostic. It has no function at that moment in time. We give it meaning and we give it function by extending it, right? Making it concrete, creating classes, and then instantiating those classes to do a particular thing, right? So I think in that way, I would answer that question. I hope that makes sense to you, but I believe we can be agnostic, but it might be a slightly different paradigm shift.
Thanks, Sam. Carol has a really great question here. She's almost put it in quotation marks. If you're in front of a senior influencer or sponsor and you're coming in with this heartfelt plea to co-design and do it together, and what would you be saying to someone who's quite hard-nosed and pragmatic, who says, "Oh, but this is the way we've always done it. For example, we've got a tier 1 consultancy that did it for the other bank, and we're going to take their playbook and do it the same way."
Yeah, great question. And I just want to clarify, this heartfelt plea, if it came across like that, was just for you guys. Okay. I wouldn't plea when in a position of leadership, when leading a transformation or working with leadership in the transformation. It takes a very different approach. But my answer would be, okay, so you've been working this way all along. So why am I even sitting here? If I represent the transformation team, and if you've called me here, and if you don't believe you need to change, then what are we all doing here, really? And the main thing, the thing I usually respond with actually is to remind people and to remind leadership. And I don't really have to do this often, because most of the leadership that I meet and talk to, they're great. They really understand why they need to change and how, right? But one thing I remind people of is, so you've always been doing it this way. That's great. But the world's changed, and you cannot do things the same way you have always done them today. I mean, COVID is one example. Those companies who had never bothered to get online collaboration going, right? And it's amazing how many people I speak to, and they still have to go into the office, people back home in the UK even, right? And they don't have the means to work from home, I think is ludicrous. So that's change with the times. All the times will change you. That's what I'll answer.
Yeah.
I'll probably leave it there.
we look, I think Sam's invitation is to start the conversation today, not necessarily go crazy and answer every single question, although we'd love to, but we have Peter Lam who's going to be speaking in a minute. So I'd like to thank you, Sam, and de-spotlight you off the stage and bring up
Guys,
thank you from everybody.
Thank you,
if you
Niall.
run a meetup,
feel free. There's loads of questions there. Contact me on LinkedIn directly if you want. If you want to pick up the phone, if you want to jump on a call at any point next week or whatever, let me know. We can start discussion. And yeah, meetups.
Very good. Well, let's take a collective breather after that. After that energetic, enthusiastic, passionate plea to become agile citizens. And I'd like to introduce briefly Peter Lam. I'm not going to take much of his time up, because I'm sure he's got lots of exciting things to talk about. As I said in the original intro, Peter and I have worked on some pretty ugly, hairy programs and faced into some of the most complex, wicked situations. And not only that, Peter and I are very passionate about education and training and development of the community. So, Peter's got these two sides of him. He's very much a hard-nosed person inside doing the work, but very much a contributor back to us as the community. So he has a good sense of what we're all collectively experiencing as Agilists, but also is at the coalface getting things done. So welcome, Peter, and I'll let you introduce your topic. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much, everyone. I've just shared my screen, and I'm just talking about agile is necessary but not sufficient for agility. So it sounds like and it feels like we've had some great speakers ahead of us. So I'll try and do my side of the bargain and keep up the energy, knowing it's a Friday afternoon for many of us, right? So hang on. So basically, I'm going to talk about three things. We're going to do a bit of an intro. We'll talk about the gap and the difference around the agile and agility, and then we're going to talk about some key lessons through stories we've learned. Now, the questions always are, so what makes you come, what are the scars and what are the stories? Where did the stories come from? So I've been lucky or unlucky, depending on who you ask, to work for a bunch of different companies, from biotechs all the way through the banks, telcos, and everything in between, and a whole bunch of conferences. So I'm sharing these stories so that you don't get caught up in the same scars that I have, right? So take advantage of that, and we'll see where we go from there, right? So why the gap between agile and agility? Now, it's interesting that, you know, in 2001, a whole collection of people came together and came and developed the Agile Manifesto, of course. Now, one of the things I always like is one of these slides from Ahmed from IC Agile, and it's a common story that you have a bunch of practices that go through, you know, a whole bunch of principles that go through to the values and then mindsets, right? That's really important, right? Now, a lot of people sort of forget and misinterpret exactly how this works, because I actually went the other way, and I think Arie touched upon it the other way. So when they got together, they all represented lots of different types of methods. So Scrum, XP, DSDM, you know, and other techniques, and Crystal and others. They identified those common practices where stuff gets done by, and from there they decided and agreed what those common methods were, if you like, but more importantly, they then came across what are the common things that made them whole, right? And the common things were the 4 value statements that we had. Now, this is really interesting and important because it's the manifesto and it's around software delivery and software management, right? And that's, for me, is where you start to have a bit of a gap between the concept of agile and agility. Now, before we get into that, what we do know is that when you think about concept, mindset, methods, and practices, right? The joys of things like practices is that these things work. And we know they work because agile projects are more likely to be successful than non-IT projects, non-agile IT projects. So we're talking about somewhere between 28 and 60% more successful. So as a result, as we can imagine, success breeds imitation. So hundreds and thousands of people who are now searching and offering Scrum Master certifications, SAFe certifications, and of course, somewhere in between all of that, we've got 2.1 million agile consultants in Australia. Now, given the working population in Australia is only 9 million, I don't know how we get there, right? So I guess it's in this lens, and Fowler called it the agile industrial complex, where you can get 4 days to certify to teach something that you've never done, right? It takes 2 days to be recognized as a master of a method, right? But the key issues and challenges we have when we start to unpack it is that Agile has very little with how fast I can teach. It's got everything to do with how fast you can learn, right? And we're starting to touch upon what Sam spoke about, is that not just about certification training, but it's actually about learning and how these things work. There is also a secondary problem, right, that this creates, is that like kids with new toys get waved around and they become evangelists, right? And my favorite set of evangelists at the moment is our friends that do HCD, right? Because it's a new thing, they now get involved, people are talking about humans, and they all get excited and wave it around, and they sort of lose sight of the goals. And this is, I think, where we start to shift from agile and we start talking about agility. So what is agility? So like others in the group, we've quoted the Agile Business Agility Institute, where it's about business agility, the capacity and willingness of an organization to adapt, create, and leverage change for the customer's benefit. Sounds fantastic, you know, but the challenge is agile, as certainly as it was defined early on, was all about software delivery, right, and software projects, right? So what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Well, business agility is a problem trying to solve. And what I like is actually a slide from Gary Hamel. So right now, your company has 21st century internet-enabled business processes, mid-20th century management processes built upon 19th century management principles. And everyone turns around and goes, ah, no, that's not us. No, we're a brand new company, we're a digital company. Oh, no, we've got the best managers, you know, and there's a lot of discussion around, you know, digitization programs are the new vogue that have been going around for the last sort of 5 to 10 years. Now you've got product process automation. So you've got all these internet technology-enabled things, we all think we're all cutting edge, but the reality is the actual foundation of what we're built on is built on 19th century management principles. Does that make sense? Well, let's jump to the next slide and have a look. So this slide is actually from inspired from Arie and from one of his presentations called The Essence of Flex. And it's something that's sort of probably worth having a look at if you haven't had a chance to jump onto Google and Google it. But it's essentially how most large organizations are structured today, right? You have marketing, product management, development, support. Anyone that works in a large organization typically has spans, has layers, and therefore that's where the organization is. And this is a great example of what we will term Taylorism, the first scientific management and the first management consultant in the world, where he talked about how you can increase efficiency of call workers, right? And this is done in the 19th century, and curious enough, it's still how we're built and how we're structured today. Where this becomes interesting is its focus is on efficiency, right? Now, where Agile gets involved is that it's not actually about efficiency, it's actually about effectiveness. So if we start to think that we manage vertically and we improve vertically, the reality is that in organizations, we deliver value horizontally, right? And therein starts to lie the conflict, right? And Al calls it the inherent challenge, and I quite like this side. So customer value is from marketing all the way through product management, development, support. The way we manage is vertically. The way our Agile software delivery works is vertically, is designed to deliver that way. Sam spoke about large organizations struggling to have truly cross-functional teams. Yeah, because if you've got so many divisions, the size of people you need to be able to span those layers is really significant, okay? So if you've got Agile that are working on teams, particularly in software that are in that vertical silos, and certainly Arie touched upon that as well, we have horizontal value, right? Now we start to see what the differences between the Agile and agility is in the business agility side of the conversation. But I guess the question is, right, as in Arie's words, is that this is about challenging the paradigm or the perception of reality, right? People manage vertically, but the reality we should be managing horizontally. So based on the scars, based on the stories you have, what are some of the key lessons that we have that move from Agile to business agility? Okay, so lesson one, or observation one, if you like. So I was working as the head of projects for an organization doing a whole bunch of payments, right? Largest payment provider in Australia. We then, our major customer was a bank. We ran the payment systems for them. Did a massive re-engineering, lots of stories about it, lots of drinking, lots of projects sorted, lots of functionality delivered. But one day I was working with a client, and whilst we kept deploying software and features, and we started to go from quarterly releases, we went to monthly releases, we went to weekly, and then suddenly we decided to move to daily as required, right? So from an Agile standpoint, we started to get quite mature and started to deploy features on a regular basis, and went really well. One thing I would never get from our customer steering committee is every time we met with them, one of the product managers, salespeople go, "Yay, we got the software." Then we go talk to the product team. They started to get increasingly downcast as increasing number of sales went up, right? And over one night, over many, many drinks, long story short, we then understood, I said, "So why the problem? Why are you worried? What's going on?" And then they shared the story, which is quite funny. Sales and product were in two different divisions. Sales were rewarded by the number of transactions they sold for payments, right? The products were rewarded by the productivity or the profitability of the product that we ran for them. What they did is, by increasing sales, because sales were selling below the cost to serve, as a result, the more they sold, the more money the other team lost, right? And this created this sort of conversation where we started to go from just the delivery side, and we started to move up towards a value chain with product management and sales, and started to have a more coherent conversation, right? And I guess the statement that sort of came for me is that whilst Agile was necessary at the time to turn around a business, it isn't really sufficient, right? You need to actually focus on the business outcome rather than Agile. So it's about the business outcome versus Agile. Agile is not the goal, right? So on one side of the one side of the board, you've got the, your standard capability maturity model, where we started to work our way through the list and systematically got better, and we optimized for that. That worked really well. Problem was, we actually needed to optimize for value, right? And we didn't do that. So then we shifted and started to shift the value from transaction volume to the added value for the transaction and start to have a different conversation, right? So for me, this was an example where we'd focus on agile, not the business outcome, and we drove the wrong outcome. Okay, so but agile is an ambition, not an outcome, and all outcomes at the end of the day are contextual to the organization, right? And that's where I think where agility focuses rather than agile, which is about producing more software. Okay. So if we step to the second lesson that we had, I got asked to join or to visit one of our banks going through a transformation. And I got asked to meet with a bunch of coaches and a bunch of execs to talk about what does leadership look like in the new world? How do they lead an agile organization? And what that meant is they said, we want you to meet one of our senior coaches so we can have a conversation about it, understand what you do, and then from there make a value-based judgment as to whether you can support us and what that looks like. So I sort of wandered in, had never heard of the coach before, sat down in a room, had a few conversations, went around in circles, and they said, look, Pete, we just need practices. We don't need training, we just need the practices. Oh, okay. And eventually I sort of flipped the question. I said, okay, so you're one of the senior coaches. She went, yeah. I said, okay, so you were hired as a graduate. Yes. Okay, so you were hired because you're super smart, super bright, did lots and lots of extracurricular activities. Is that right? Yes, cool. So then you then spent 7 years working in the bank, yeah? Every time you didn't follow process, you got smacked. Yep, cool. So therefore, a couple of years ago, you went for training to do Scrum Master training, and now you're an Agile coach. Is that right? Yes. So I said, how do you know what great collaborative teams looks like, and how do you know what great collaborative teams feels like, right? Because at the end of the day, if you don't know what good looks or feels like, how on earth are you going to coach towards it, right? And her response was, oh, well, I always run great collaborative teams. And I said, okay, you run great collaborative teams for the bank. How do you know what great collaborative teams feels like? She goes, I run great collaborative teams for the bank, right? And this sort of pattern repeated, and I think the penny started to drop with a few people in the room. And I said, okay, so let me just, I said, let me flip the question slightly differently. How do you know what great looks like if you've only worked here? And she went, well, I've gone to the digital companies, some of them in Melbourne. I've had a look and I understand, what great looks like. I said, okay, well, I've walked on the MCG, but that doesn't make me an AFL player, right? So what, so how do you know what great collaborative teams looks like and what it feels like? And I guess the lesson that this sort of made me sort of start to think about is that whilst it's wonderful that you work for a long organization, right? Because it gives you so much insight, right? How do you help them change their paradigm? How do you help them change their reflexes in either 2 days or 4 days, right? Which is the duration of many of these courses. And I guess the line or the penny that dropped for me was that, training is essential, but it's not sufficient, right? It takes more than certifications and training to be able to coach and lead change, right? And I guess when I started to think about this in terms of today's discussion and presentation, the way I sort of looked at it is that we've got Scrum certifications by the team level on my left, right? And there are so many team level certs for a 13-page Scrum guide. SAFe in all its complexity has 13 certs. The problem, though, I think, is twofold. One is certifications don't necessarily tie in to what we would term a model of skills acquisition. So this is how adults learn. Adults learn by, becoming a novice, become advanced beginner, competent, proficient, right? And that takes time, right? And the way you learn as a novice and beginner, if you think about like when you're trying to play golf, you don't learn by going on a 2-day course, right? You learn by someone showing you how to hold a golf club and swing it around. You learn by having lots of conversations and playing lots of games. And it's only when you start to become somewhere between the competent proficient that you might turn around and, join Sam on the golf course. If Sam doesn't play golf, let me show you some tips on how it works, right? So this takes time and effort, right, to do that. The second element that comes in is there's some loose adult learning principles that says learning is 70-20-10, 10% from coursework and training, 20% from developmental relationships, and 70% from challenging assignments, right? So if you took it back to the golf example, 10% of your learnings from someone teaching you how to play golf and swing it, right? Your developmental relationships is playing with people that are better than you, right? So you're the odd one out, so they're there to provide support and advice. And 70% of the time is getting out there and playing golf, right? And to be honest, I'm terrible at playing golf, right? So training is essential, because if you don't have training, how do you know you actually know stuff, right? But it's only one component of what you need to learn before you can then reach a point where you can start to choose, right? So I guess at the end of the day, it's about pragmatism, because you want to be able to choose what works, but you don't want to be locked into a prison of methodology. That being said, though, you have to respect the frameworks and their practitioners before you hack into a method, because you want to understand why they've chosen to do certain things in certain ways, because usually these methods have a cascading impact, right? And I guess to quote the bananas from earlier, it does take time for a green banana to go yellow, right? It takes time for a novice to become competent. And there's something that we don't necessarily recognize, and potentially sometimes we overlook on a regular basis. Okay. So if I shift to the third sort of story, is that I was working doing what we would term an assessment center as part of a set of restructures. So what that means is that we're looking at a bunch of people, right, who've just been restructured to reapply for their role. Right, it's a whole day affair in many cases, or multi-day affair depending on the organisation. You're putting people through scenarios, you're judging them, assessing them, supporting them to try and display the types of behaviours and characteristics that you want them to see, right? That you want them to use in the future, the values that you want going forwards, right? And these days are quite tiring, because you're trying to do the right thing by everyone, make sure everyone has a chance to speak, everyone has a chance to share their story, make sure they feel comfortable, and put their best foot forward. And that's our role, right? Through the write-up process, we completed it. And then what we did is we then did, once we'd completed the assessments, if you like, that was then put into a great big mix where they got bell curved, right? Now that was done by the leadership team. And they started arguing who should be over that, or who has role, who doesn't, all that kind of conversation, okay? Interesting. I have enormous issues with the bell curving concept, but putting that to one side, at the end of it, I sat down with the leader, right? And he, at that time, had about 1,000 people working for him, right? And I said, so how was it? And he goes, oh, Pete, it's so tiring. I'm exhausted. Such a challenge. And I'm like, oh, why the challenge? And he goes, we got to change the way we work. We've got to change the way we deliver. We've got to make sure we focus on the customer. There's such work we need to do, right? And I went, oh, okay. Well, that's funny. And he said to me, well, why? And I said, well, it's funny. The people that are sitting around that table right now are the ones that define the way you work, the way you deliver, and your level of customer focus. So what are you doing differently, right? And he had it, and this is not a junior guy, right? 1,000 people working for him. His head went up. He took a step back, and he was literally flabbergasted that I called him on it, right? He didn't realize it. And I guess the thing that I learned at that point in time was that at the end of the day, leadership intent is not sufficient, right? It's not just about the leadership intent, right? Leaders simply operate in a bigger system. That system supports us as individuals, right? So when I look at this organizations, right, and I look at, there's a survey called the 14th State of the Agile Report. They often talk about, I don't know if you can see it, they talk about, the top 2 issues around challenges when adopting scaling Agile is general organizational resistance to change and not enough leadership participation. Sure, but remember this picture that we spoke about earlier? They're simply in a bigger system than us, because they report to a board who makes commitments, right? Those commitments are made, usually financial commitments. So that means revenue, cost out, and all that kind of stuff. And certainly in Australia, the interesting thing, especially with the larger companies, those commitments are driven by super funds And those super funds invest money for you and I, right? So whilst the leader, right, who sits here may want to change the world and may have the best intention to change the world, you've got two problems. One is they sit in a much bigger system that we're part of, as you know, through our superannuation contributions that we have to do every quarter, right? But the second estimate, right, the second element, and this is something touched upon by Arie and Sam earlier, is that be kind to your leaders, right? They've got 30 years of experience and 30 years of financial and egotistical rewards, saying that what they've done has worked and has been successful in their own right. And you're now trying to help them change their reflexes, right? So again, refer to, you know, lesson 1, agile is not the outcome, you know, focus on the business outcome, right? But at the end of the day, leadership intent is important, but it in itself is not sufficient to change the world, right? How are we going to support our leaders from changing their reflexes and their paradigms they're working, right? Cool. So, whoops, step 4 or lesson 4, right? This is a bit of a different sort of beast, and this talks about change. One of the most complex things you can change is losing weight, right? And this is, and for those who know me, is possibly is no surprise. For those of you who don't know me, I've had the fortune and misfortune of losing substantial weight multiple times over my life. I've lost 25 kilos 3 times in my life, and curious enough, I've put on even more, right? And it's one of these ongoing challenges they have. And so when the first time I lost weight was in my mid-20s, and I did it through running, and I dropped over 25 kilos and did super well. Well, according to me, I did super well, so I was very happy with it. And then over the period of the next 3 or 4 years, I started to put the weight back on, right? And I couldn't work out why. So I started, well, there's obviously lifestyle type things, and I thought, well, maybe is it me? Well, hang on, I see all these weight loss ads. Let's have a look. So what I did is I jumped online and Googled, and there was a TV show called The Biggest Loser at some stage, which some of you may or may not have known. But one thing that I thought was really interesting is that research published, and this is from health.com, research published in Journal Obesity tracked 14 contestants for 6 years, right? Whilst each person initially shed an average of 100 pounds, only one was able to keep the weight off. The rest of the contestants regained much of the weight they lost, right? So if those of you, and most people have sort of seen The Biggest Loser, and I can't see whether everyone's nodding or shaking their head, so I'm hoping this sort of makes sense. Most of the people that go in are, let's be fair, very much overweight, right? They live in a house where, they work together to diet, they work together to exercise, they have special, personal trainers that are, super fit, super muscly, and everyone generally loses weight. They get weekly weigh-ins and they lose substantial amounts of weight. What's interesting is that when they then leave, 13 of the 14 that were tracked have put on weight again, right? And this opens up a more interesting sort of conversation for me. In their own right, they were unable to lose weight. They went to the house, were able to lose weight. And when they left the house, they then put on the weight because they didn't necessarily were able to embed the change, right? So the way this applies in my head about change, behaviors, and things like that, to me is really simple. I learned that at the end of the day, a big bang may be necessary, but it's not sufficient to sustain change, right? Sometimes you need a step change to get started, but it's not enough to help you sustain and embed, right? So if we look at broader organizations, right? Many organizations, we've spoken about doing change to people and change resistance. People don't resist change, they resist being changed, right? Ask anyone that's asked me to do something specifically. Just don't like doing it, right? At the end of the day, whilst there may be some benefits doing the sort of pro-sci traditional waterfall style step change, restructure and others, to really embed the change and to do it, you kind of need something that's iterative, something that's incremental, something that allows you to co-create the change, to build that learning environment, that continuous improvement environment, and that set of skills that you need to sustain it, right? Because if you never learn to, or in my case, if I'd never learned that, 25 martinis is an excellent night, but bad for my health outcomes, if I don't learn that, in week 1, then I'm really going to struggle to keep the weight off in week 10, right? And that's how I sort of think about the world. You either help and support people adjust the habits in in an incremental way, and then that change gets sustained, or you choose to make a step change. But the step change and the crash dieters of the world rarely stay slim, rarely stay fit, and rarely stay where they ideally want to get to. All right, cool. So I guess if I look at the final lesson or final step, is that when I talk to some of the strategy teams that I've worked with over the years, a lot of them spend a lot of time thinking about and designing, the world of the future and things like that, which is fantastic, right? And I was debriefing with one of them, and I remember talking to them and sort of saying, well, hang on, Agile's got not a lot to do with how fast I can teach, but it's got a lot to do with what you can learn, right? And her response to me was, yeah, we've learned a lot in the last year, and I'm like, sure. The problem is everything you've come up with is already published on Google and many years old, right? And I guess what I've observed from that, and the lesson that I have from that, is that having a desire to learn is necessary because we're building a learning environment. But again, it's not sufficient. So, ultimately the speed of the transformation will always be limited by the speed of learning. If the focus and the optimization, refer to lesson 1, is around learning agile maturity statements, then that's what you're going to learn and optimize for, or you're going to learn and optimize for customer value. But at the end of the day, it's absolutely going to be limited by the speed of learning, right? So remember this picture before that we spoke about, where there's models of skills acquisition and the time it takes. If you look at the 70-20-10, at the end of the day, the 10%, the 70%, if you like, is made up of time and capacity to learn. The second element is made up of being surrounded by the right people. Much like my golf example, it's not about you playing golf and being, if I was learning to play golf with a bunch of other beginners, I'd get better. But I'd get a lot better, a lot faster, playing with people that are a couple of steps ahead of me, right? And this is part of the role of the Agile coaches, right? And then, of course, there's the right training, because there's no point learning about method X if method Y is going to be used, or whatever the case might be, right? Training and certificate. Training is important, more important than certification. Certification is merely helpful, right? And the final one that's less sort of, that I certainly strongly believe in, is what we call magic, or otherwise known as learning debt. So lots of people often talk about saying, well, this agile stuff is really new and this and that. And sure it is, right? But I'm not sure if you're aware, but the Scrum Guide has just passed its 25th birthday. The irony is Prince 2 is only 24 years old, right? So Scrum is published as a method longer than one of your key project management methods, right? So I sort of shrug and go, well, if you haven't learned anything for the last 20 or 30 years, you've got a lot of learning debt you've got to catch up with. So again, it's important to have a desire to learn, but it's not sufficient, because it's that history of learning that you've had. And much like what Sam has said, is that if someone trundles up with 25 certifications and got 2 years of experience, I point back at the 70-20-10 and saying, well, it's great you've done all the coursework and training, but what are your developmental relationships that you have? And what are the challenging assignments you've had to embed those knowledge? So where does it go from book smart to actually be able to ship outcomes? And it's only when you go through that journey that you then have an ability, in my mind, you're the right type of person to then start to say, well, I'm going to start to challenge and adjust the methods and start to become increasingly agnostic, right? People, when you're learning to play golf, you learn to play the textbook golf. Once you become good at it, that's when you start learning not only to hit the ball straight, but how to curve the ball left and right. Now, again, I stress, this is just me looking at the golf and talking to golf players, as opposed to being any good at golf myself. But you still got to get yourself up to that competent standpoint, and ideally more than one method and set of techniques over a period of time, and the experience and the scars. And then that's where then you can really start to make a massive difference to those around you. Cool. Thank you very much. If you want to reach out, email, Twitter, LinkedIn, all those are great mechanisms to do so. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope I didn't keep you too late on a Friday afternoon or Friday evening.
Not a problem. Oops. Can you hear me there, mate?
I can indeed.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much. And we do have 12 minutes on our lovely time box that we put in place for this event today. If anyone's got any questions, maybe we can open up to questions from Sam or yourself, given that you're both here, and kill a few birds with one collective stone. So you guys can scroll through or maybe jump and grab any of the Q&As that are in there. There's one question about, is this going to be available on YouTube, Sam? And are these slides going to be available? Because six people have uploaded that one.
So I've been trying to go and give text answers whilst Peter was speaking, of course, whilst listening to Peter's lovely presentation. But yes, we can definitely make the slides available. And yes, in fact, it's being streamed right now on YouTube. And when the stream is finished, it will be available on the Agnostic Agile YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube and you can just search for it, and don't forget to subscribe. We love subscriptions because then it'll come in your feed rather than always requesting it. So yeah, it will be available. It will all be available. Yeah.
So Peter, thank you for your talk, mate. A couple of really nice threads, and I want to just call out the fact that you've really blended and integrated the previous two speakers and some of their thinking through into your talk, and I think it's really fantastic. I love the term convergent validity, when three really smart people who I respect all end up pointing to the same thing. And this idea that an organization has a reflex that kicks back at you, that bananas take time to go yellow, and all of these mixed metaphors, I think, are really indicative of the fact that the work we do, this transformational change, is non-trivial by nature. It is significant, it is difficult, and it is so people-centric that to push it on to people and organizations is naive. And we need to recognize that it's a human system that builds competency over time with, the mentorship of the people that have been along the journey a bit more. And there's a couple of really big themes coming up for me, like transformations. Everyone's in a hurry to just tick the box and say we're transformed, but mindsets and people take time. And, this idea that, we want to tick the spreadsheet to say we've mobilized 300 teams. Does that mean we're agile now? That's, and I cannot forget the 2 or 3 times I've been with CEOs of large companies where they've had that view where we have mobilized for agile and that makes us agile. So, for me, it was just so fantastic to hear a recognition from 3 very experienced people that the tale of change is, a significant undertaking once you've mobilized for change or done some training. So, yeah, I just wanted to recognize that. Well done, guys. Any other questions there jump out at you guys before we start to wrap up? We've got another 9 minutes. Is there anything there that you want to grab and talk to?
Yeah, look, no, I saw a question from Nikki saying, what's some of the most memorable, oh, hang on, it scrolled. What are some of the most memorable, where did that go? What are some of the most memorable aha moments you've had that displayed your transition from being book smart to actually shipping outcomes on your agile journey? I think there were probably two moments that really the penny dropped. The first one is that whilst I've been doing iterative delivery back from the days of a product called Lotus Notes, so quite some years ago, I walked into an advanced agile course with a chap called Alistair Coburn. And the first question he asked was that, why is waterfall more efficient than agile? And the second question is, why is agile more effective than waterfall? And for the next 3 days, I got completely blown apart, right, by the thinking and the challenge that he presented about value slicing and driving outcomes, right? So that was probably the first one where I went from knowing how to do agile, right, to understanding the shift of using agile to de-risk and to drive value for customers in a matter of days rather than months, right? So that was the first memorable moment, right? It was 3 days, right? Compelling, worthy of doing the course if he comes to Australia, right? The second one was sitting down, and I mentioned the story earlier. I was sitting next to our this colleague that had over 1,000 people working for him, and realizing that he was more, despite being paid far more than many of us, potentially all of us put together, his bonuses being presumably astronomical, the fact he was so powerless in an environment, despite having so much power, there was so little he could actually change. And that's when I first got true empathy for some of the leaders. Because prior to that, the leaders just have to change their mind. Someone's just got to make a decision. Now I realize, and that's where it opened up my mind to go, actually, they are, in some regards, the least most powerful people in the room, right? So they're the two moments. Cool.
Yep.
Sam,
It's all good stuff.
Question?
And I'd like to sort of build on that. I think for me, when I was with the product team, and we went from reading about lean startup, and I'd run all these seminars in this company about lean startup. I'd never really worked with it, but as a theorist, I was sort of pretty good at explaining it. And I got thrown into this product team, and to see it come to life and ship a real working product and test it in market with real customers in 4 weeks by essentially sticky taping together current things that we could just use and go out and get validated data. So I really echo what Arie said. This idea that practicalness and going and doing things as a way to change your perspective on work, and to then have that learned experience. So your reflexes start to change and your paradigms shift from the learned experience. That's what really drives me. And all of the frameworks do it as well, go from a book to actually going with a team. And when I'm hiring and training and mentoring coaches, the first question is, tell me about the first time you worked with a team. And if they're applying for a senior coaching role and they haven't worked with a team, I'll go, well, what's going on, right? You've got book smarts on Scrum, but you've never gone down and done that team level work. So that's some of my reflections on that. Anything, Sam, you want to throw in the last couple of minutes, and then we're going to close?
No, I think the only thing I want to say actually is, again, I just want to thank a lot of people, all of you guys, for coming and listening. We are going to make the slides available. Questions have been coming into me through LinkedIn as well, which is great. What I'd recommend is, I just want to clarify something. There's no planned meetups to talk about Agile Citizen, for those asking. What I want is for you guys to set this stuff up and have a conversation. I will definitely be engaged in this soon, but contact me if you want to do a meetup, if you want me to speak at one of your meetups, or anything, or if you want to co-create this idea together. I want to put that out there. So it's out there, use it well, and let's do something with it.
Yeah, that's fine. I've got a meetup coming up in a week and a half, Sam. I can slot you in and we can maybe do something to just keep the momentum through to Christmas. So watch this space.
Yeah, thanks, man. And thank you, Niall, by the way. Thank you very much, Niall, for facilitating. Fantastic.
No, it's easy to do with you guys. All right, well, I think we'll close. We can turn off the YouTube, or we can say goodbye to each other virtually. And as Sam and Arie said, this is going over into those other regions with other speakers. So come along and join in there.
Enjoy.
I don't think we're going to take live questions. We're just going to close because we've got the video and everything running. And we'll have to do some back channels if people are putting up their hands and wanting to talk. It's just the webinar format, everybody. That's just the way we're rolling tonight. So right. Thank you and goodbye. I think we'll close there. Do you want me to close the meeting, Sam, and we can sign off?
Please.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.